Welcome to the podcast, A Drink with Derek. Follow comedian Derek Richards on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and don't forget to subscribe to his YouTube channel and watch all episodes of the podcast. Now grab a drink and join your host, Derek Richards.
Hey, welcome to the podcast. It's A Drink with Derek. Derek Richards, your host here in Las Vegas. Follow me online, DerekRichards.com, all the social media stuff, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And looking forward to heading out on the road here with the Irish Comedy Tour. We'll get to that here in just a moment. Excited for my guest here today. I just bought his book, and you should buy it as well. It's called Virtue Bombs. It is How Hollywood Got Woke and Lost Its Soul. I am super excited to be having our guest on here in just a moment. But before we get to Christian Totto, who is in Denver, Colorado, I want to thank our sponsors at Vegas Sports Advantage. If you're going to bet sports, if you're out here in Las Vegas, if you're anywhere, because you can bet sports any place on the planet now, go to Vegas Sports Advantage. Let them do the legwork for you. These guys do all the research on games. They know who's playing, who's not playing, last-minute scratches, point spreads, line movements, everything. And they do a brilliant job of breaking the games down. It's all science. It's all numbers. VegasSportsAdvantage.com. Go to their website and save some money. Any package that you buy for their picks, type in the promo code Derek35 and get 35% off all the packages. And while you're online, screwing around, grab my fourth album, Double Down, recorded at Laugh-In Comedy Cafe in Fort Myers, Florida, where I will be April 14, 15, and 16. iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, Double Down. Snag your copy today. And as I mentioned, the Irish Comedy Tour. I'm going to be taking a break from doing the recording the shows. We have some prior episodes that are going to be coming up here. But again, the Irish Comedy Tour is starting up very, very soon. See our special on Amazon Prime, and then come and see us live. Myself, Derek Kane, Damon Liebert, and also Patrick Garrity is going to join us for the first three shows of the tour. And then Michael Malone is going to hook up with us March 9th in Port Charlotte, Florida, all the way through March 20th. Again, the irishcomedytour.com. But again, see us online first. See our special on Amazon Prime or wherever you get your comedy specials. And it is an insanely non-PC special. Just giving you a heads up, okay? We did not care at all about wokeness, and I am stunned that the distributor did not care about wokeness at the time when they cranked it out. But my guest today, speaking of woke and fighting against it, my guest today is Christian Totto, who is an award-winning journalist, film critic, and founder of HollywoodInTotto.com. His new book, Virtue Bombs, How Hollywood Got Woke and Lost Its Soul, skewers La La Land for pledging allegiance to identity politics above all else. Find him online at HollywoodInTotto.com. But you can also find him right here with me right now. Christian Totto is my guest today. Sir, how are you?
I am great. How are you?
Good to see you. You are in Denver, Colorado, if I'm not mistaken.
I am, and I didn't see my city on your tour sheet, so let's fix that soon.
Well, you need to talk to somebody. You're an author. You're an influential person. If you can go ahead and make this happen, I would gladly come to Denver and enjoy having a cocktail with you, sir. Glad to have you here. Super stoked about the book. This is I'll tell you what. If you appreciate somebody who has you did so much research on this thing. I'm putting this book together because I was looking, and everything is marked with articles that you cite, and how it's not just you spewing your opinion on stuff. You literally did just an absolute boatload of research putting this together. Virtue Bombs, How Hollywood Got Woke and Lost Its Soul. Before we get to that, though, how did you get your start?
Yeah. I am a failed art major. I went to art school for quite some time, picked up 3 degrees, which I've yet to use. And then I thought, okay, I don't know how to draw hands and feet. That's not good. And I also have no clue how to market my skills, as limited as they are. So I went to plan B, which was I like to write. I love movies. So I became a journalist, and I was always thinking I want to be a movie critic. And there's no real direct path. You don't go from A to B to C. So I just kind of got into 2 different newspapers and elbowed my way in successfully. And then when I moved from DC to Denver a little bit later on, I thought, let me just go solo and just do what I do. So I made my own website and created my own career. Along the way, I've worked for Breitbart News and a couple other different companies, but really just wanted to go solo. I just want to do what I want to do on my own terms. And more specifically, I realized when you review films, when you cover Hollywood, the vast majority of people are left of center, and there's no crime in that. It just is what it is. And I thought, well, I am right of center, and I think there are very few people who do that from that perspective. So that's why I embrace it.
Well, I was going to ask, how did you get into covering this angle of Hollywood? Was it sort of you seeing how it was only being viewed from the left, and you felt there was a vacancy of
Yeah,
people writing this and looking at Hollywood from the right?
that's exactly right. But also, I really wasn't a political person for most of my life. And then I was in DC, 9/11 happened, and I saw how the two different parties approached that horrible attack. And I thought, I don't think I want to be with those people. I want to be with these people. And it kind of awakened me to the sort of the political scene. And I happened to be at a right of center newspaper, the Washington Times, at the time. I took the job because I wanted to work. It wasn't like a political mission for me. But then I thought, well, my views are evolving. I'm at a newspaper that embraces those views. And like you said, I started to look around at my colleagues and I thought, a lot of them are very smart and successful, and I like the work they do, but they're covering it from a different perspective than I would. And I thought, well, half the country is right, half the country is left. I think, I think that side needs some support and some, someone to kind of speak out for them. So that's why I did it.
Well, and when people seem to look at things being like all the reviewers come from New York or Los Angeles, and people seem to forget the flyover part of the country, which is, I don't know,
Yeah.
several 100,000 square miles between Los Angeles and New York City. So I think it's fantastic that you're approaching this from the angle that you are. Your book, Virtue Bombs, which can be snagged on Amazon, it got here in like 2 seconds. I think I ordered it and it was at my door like about 20 seconds later. It's like
That was
Wile
me.
E.
I
Coyote.
went to live with it.
That was you. And
That's
you
right.
come by and you drop off some cupcakes and an autographed copy of the book. Virtue Bombs, How Hollywood Got Woke and Lost Its Soul. Before we go any further, I want to go ahead and pull up the definition of woke as described by Google. So Sean, go ahead and pull this up. The definition of woke as per Google.
Woke.
Adjective. Alert to injustice in society, especially racism. We need to stay angry and stay woke.
We need to stay angry, Christian. We just need to stay angry. Stay angry and stay woke. There's been clearly a ton of injustices in society, and we need to stay angry and stay woke. I'm not saying racism is good by any means. Racism's bad, but this whole energy of just being angry and staying woke. So let me ask you about that. What is your thoughts on this?
It's an interesting definition. I don't necessarily disagree with it, by the way. I think it's more accurate than I realized. But I'm not angry. I don't think you're angry. I get
No.
frustrated for sure what's going on in the culture. But I want to, I think I might get to this point later on, but I think it's important to say it now. If this were really true and we really wanted to make a better society, we wanted to wipe out racism, those are all good things. We want to wipe out racism. Racism is horrible. But what we see in the culture, especially in Hollywood, is this double standard where if a Hunter Biden shares some texts and there's the N-word on there, you think that would cause outrage and a sensation and he'd be canceled and he couldn't sell his artwork. But no, nothing happens. He's fine. No one cancels him. And he goes out and sells his artwork for hundreds of thousands of dollars. But, if you're Morgan Wallen and you're a country western singer and you happen to be white and you use that awful word, and not even against someone of color, but just to say it, drinking with buddies and, making a mistake and saying it, and then you're canceled and you have to spend an entire year suffering a significant body blow to your career. So I think even the premise is flawed. The woke mob wants to make a better society. And on some level, I agree with that. But if you're not applying it equally, then something's fishy there. Something's wrong. And that's part of what I cover in the book.
Well, explain the title of your book, Virtue Bombs.
Yeah, it wasn't my idea. I like it, though. I think my publisher came up with
love
it. But, what we're talking about often, not always, but often, is that these virtuous projects, TV shows, movies, they often fall flat on their face. You can have a long-running franchise like the Terminator series, and that gets woke, and the last installment just didn't make much money. Party of Five got woke and started to, address the immigration and the border, and that lasted one season. There's a new TV show called High Fidelity, which was a kind of a spin on the book and the movie. The movie had John Cusack. That one lasted one season. So I think there are a lot of examples where when they go woke, the audience just kind of recoils and says, we don't really want that. We want to be entertained, and we're not against a story that touches on some significant issues. But if the issues are so in your face and they're full of lectures and it's so obvious what's going on, then people often will tune away, and that's the virtue bomb part.
You know what's funny is remember years ago when you're watching sitcoms and then you would see a trailer promoting an upcoming episode and it'll be like, on a very special home improvement. And you're like, okay. It's like, here comes the episode with the message. I mean, that always made me laugh.
Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned that. I think I refer to it as a very special blossom. Seems like everything's about with me, but a lot of shows have that too. That was just my touchstone. But yeah, and it's okay to talk about difficult subjects on shows, even in a sitcom. It can be handled well. I think that sort of framing is rather almost humorous in an accidental point of view. But I'm not here to say you can't make political movies and you can't cover racial injustice. But there's sort of a tenor and a tone to these woke projects where it's above and beyond that. It feels more like a lecture. It feels like the story is stopping cold to share talking points, or there's only one side of the story being delivered. You could have a debate, and that could be for great tension. It's sometimes a good drama involves having two people on different sides of the fence, sort of arguing or having a conversation. But often, what the woke does, it front loads it in a certain direction, and it kind of tells you what to think instead of letting you, as the viewer, kind of interpret it.
Well, God forbid you would have an opposing opinion. That's just rude.
That's true. We get our marching orders, and we should follow them. So,
absolutely. When do you think Hollywood started losing its soul?
Well, I've been kind of mocked a little bit about that because it's Hollywood has a soul, but I'm talking about a creative soul. And listen, it's often, if not always, about commerce. It's about capitalism at the end of the day. But I think in the 80s and 90s, at the very least, storytellers were telling their stories. They could be good, they could be bad, but there was more freedom, more expression, more ability to kind of wax on about a certain topic, to make a comedy that was outrageous and bawdy and off the charts in a way. But I think in more recent years, that's sort of changed. And I think that's why you're seeing a real contraction with comedy. I mean, you can go out on the road and you can tell jokes and maybe there are consequences there. But from a movie and TV point of view, when was the last great comedy? When was the last one you had to tell all your friends? Maybe it was R-rated. Maybe it was outrageous. Maybe it involved some SNL alums, but they don't make as many anymore for this reason. And I think it's been slowly taking over the culture, and then it kind of hit fast forward. And I actually look back at the Ghostbusters reboot from 2016 as one of the examples because, it was woke in that it was a gender reboot. It was, instead of the four gentlemen, it was four ladies as the Ghostbusters. But you know what? I think everyone would have been A-okay with that if it was funny, if the first trailer was outrageous and you couldn't stop rewatching it because it was so humorous. But it was kind of a clunker, and the movie itself was kind of a dud too. So I think that was kind of really typified what's going on here, where it's about empowerment. It's about, you need to have female scientists on the screen so that our young girls will grow up and aspire to be a scientist. Well, how about just making a funny movie? So that, there are cultural nuances to these things, but first and foremost, we want to be entertained. And I think when the woke gets in the way, that it sort of short circuits that.
Who or what group is responsible for pushing this agenda?
There's no one group. I think Hollywood and major corporations have gone woke. You see that across the board. I think that the studios are thinking this is the way they need to be in order to get to avoid trouble and to avoid controversy. I think the actors and the creators are either on board or more likely and more obviously afraid of not being on board, so they have to assume a certain pose. There was an article, it might have been in the Variety of the Hollywood Reporter, about how a publicist said that a lot of actors will be very woke and maybe share some information online that they don't necessarily believe fully, but they feel like they need to be that way. They need to kind of share that, because otherwise they could be, you could assume that they're not on board. So if you're not woke on social media, if you're an actor or actress, maybe someone looks past you. Maybe in our day and age, sometimes just being apolitical can put a target on your back. I have a whole chapter about how Taylor Swift and Jimmy Fallon kind of fell into that category where they were pretty apolitical. Jimmy Fallon kind of hit both sides, and then the media really attacked both of them. They attacked Fallon because he dared to tousle Trump's hair, and Taylor Swift wasn't using her platform to pitch for Hillary. And in a way, whether it happened organically or not, they were kind of bullied into, being more political. And now Jimmy Fallon is like Stephen Colbert light. And now Taylor Swift is, pushing Democrats for office and sharing certain talking points and using her platform to promote the progressive agenda. So that's what happens.
Now, when you end up seeing things, and I want to pull this up because we're talking about movies being produced, and this was from a buddy of mine. I had mentioned this to you before. A friend of mine had just finished producing a film or put together a film, and he's being hammered by woke editors. And it's a funny movie. I'm not going to mention his name. I'm not going to mention the name of the product, but I'm going to go ahead and pull up the email that he had sent to the editors on this. So, Sean, go ahead and pull this up here. This, and I had sent this to you, Christian, we set out to make a movie that didn't play by any of the typical Hollywood PC woke rules. We weren't trying to offend people, but we certainly didn't pull any punches when crafting jokes. And now it pains me to watch how many jokes/scenes were cut and replaced with watered-down versions that will barely elicit a laugh just so we could appease the most marginalized group of victims in America who'd never watched this movie in the first place. I understand 100% where you're coming from. We want to get distribution so our investors get paid back. I get it. I truly do. Yet I thought it was understood that a watered-down safe movie was not what any of us had in mind when this began. I realize this is now run by committee and I'm just venting here, but I truly believe we're doing ourselves a huge injustice by bowing to the marginalized. In doing so, might win the distribution battle, but will lose the street cred, cult following, and longevity war. Sure, we'll get seen, followed by shitty reviews, then the movie will disappear. Let's hope I'm wrong. If so, I'll be the first to admit it. Your comments on this?
It's fascinating. First of all, the fact that we can share who this is, and I understand completely why you're doing that. I get it. I'm not disagreeing, but that's part of the frustration I have, and I think many people have, is that you can't speak out. You can't defend your work. You can't, say this is wrong or I believe this as opposed to that. So that's part of the problem. I also think when it comes to comedy, I would imagine if I'm a member of a marginalized group, I'm a straight white male, so I'm not technically. Would you want to be protected in this fashion, where you want to be shielded from jokes, and basically society says, well, we can't kind of poke fun at you, we can't do things involving you. I mean, in a way, comedy is the ultimate equalizer. It says everyone is flawed, everyone can be poked fun of. Let's be in on the joke. And if you have a buddy and he or she can't take a ribbing, it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to hang out with that person. It seems kind of stiff. You can't even, can't roll with the punches. And often when we're in friends groups, we're razzing on each other. Guys do it all the time. And women do it as well. And so I find that very frustrating. And I also think it's like, why comedy is getting harder today is that email, is that experience that's going on. And, it's just one person, but I've heard similar stories in recent weeks and recent months. So this is not isolated. And I'll draw back to Todd Phillips. He's the director of the Hangover trilogy and some other films as well, some pretty successful comedies. And one of the reasons why he made Joker, which I thought was a great film, he said, I don't know if I want to do comedies anymore. The landscape is just is just chock full of landmines, and I don't want to go there. And here's this very talented, very successful comedy director saying, I'm out. That means something. And it doesn't bode well for society. I want to laugh. And one quick note, and you're the comedian, you know this more than I do, but I've been thinking a lot about comedy and darkness and Jimmy Carr and some of the trouble he's got into recently. I think, I don't want my friends to have a pie in their face. I don't want them to slip on a banana peel. I don't want them to get hit in the crotch with a ball. And yet we laugh at all those things. There's something dark about comedy. There's something, I don't know if it's unpleasant or we see these kind of outrageous things and often we laugh despite ourselves. We may see someone tripping and falling. We may see, a joke at someone's expense, but within the context of humor, if it's kind of orchestrated well, it's funny. It's just sort of a natural reaction. We don't even think about it. Oh, pie to the face. That must be funny because the person now has cream on their face. Well,
Right.
no, it's just instinctual. And I think that we kind of examine the comedy in such a way that we remove some of that. And, if I told a dirty joke, it doesn't mean I'm a dirty human being. I still have a wife and kids and I treat them the best I can. it doesn't make me a monster. And I think we're going to this weird place where we assume that if you tell a dirty joke or a naughty joke or a joke against a group, that it means that we hate them and we want them to suffer, something bad. We don't. It's just a joke. And there are good jokes and bad jokes and jokes that are expertly timed, and they're, each word in the joke is exactly right, and some that aren't, and some jokes fail, and sometimes a dark joke isn't even funny. It's just dark. So I just I've
Right.
been thinking a lot about this and how it pertains to comedy and this whole woke conversation.
Well, and my buddy who wrote that film, who had sent that email off to the editor, is a comedian. He spent a ton of time writing it and did, as you well know, a million rewrites on the thing,
Yeah.
and was very proud of the final product when it got produced. And so now all of a sudden he's going through the editing process, and he had a budget of just under $1 million. I think it was probably around 800,000. I think was the budget.
Mhm.
And so, obviously the investors, like he had said in the thing, they want to make their money back, but by the same token, I mean, look at a movie like Caddyshack.
Hmm.
I mean, you look at some of these movies that ended up just gaining they were shredded by critics, but ended up gathering such a huge cult following. And when my buddy's film got made and I had read the script, I'm like, this is really good. It's wrong. There's some turns that he takes in this thing, and some of the things that he says that just make me laugh out loud. But I'm a comedian, so I have that sense of humor. And I just don't know when it got to the point where if you didn't think something was funny, you just didn't watch it. You turned it off.
Yeah.
You walked away. You went to a comedy club. Somebody didn't make you laugh. You're like, nah, that wasn't my cup of tea. Let's go get pancakes.
Yeah. Listen, if I'm easily offended, I go see Jim Gaffigan because he's not a hard charging comic. If I love to be offended, maybe I see Dave Chappelle, who goes there, who challenges his audience in very interesting ways. So I want to have that diversity of content out there. A quick point, there was a story a couple of years ago, I think it was in USA Today. They had one of their younger reporters opine on Animal House and how, it was problematic and this and that. And I think one of the scenes they were against was John Belushi's character is looking in at a sorority house and the girls are getting naked and they're, he's on the ladder and then he falls back. And I think that was one of their objections, that they were objectifying women. His character isn't someone who's a role model. He's the guy who can't graduate. He's the schlub. Why do we need to have him as this sort of paragon of virtue? Why can't we have a character who's a jerk, who's laughable, who does bad things? We can laugh. It's almost vicarious that we kind of laugh. I wouldn't do that if I had a daughter. I don't want her to be spied on by some guy in college. We're not, where do we make these we jump through these hoops to say you can't do these kind of jokes? Meanwhile, and this is getting back to a point I mentioned earlier, we have about 24 hitman movies coming out every day where our hero is a hitman and he kills people for a living. And the woke mob just doesn't even acknowledge that or attack that or say that's wrong too. Well, where's the consistency? It's all over the map. And that's where something's awry, that it's not really heartfelt, this attack.
Well, what's so sad is that I actually used John Belushi as a role model, which explains why I lasted 1 year in college.
It was your choice, though.
Exactly. That was my choice. See, but I didn't, I could watch John Belushi in that movie bashing a guitar over the guy's head in the stairwell, pounding bottles of whiskey and then, throwing it against the wall and it smashes and he smashes beer cans on his head. Did I do any of that stuff? No. I just watched it and moved on with my life. Now you're a parent. You have how many children do you have?
I have 2 kids, 2 boys.
How old are they?
10 and 13.
What do you let them watch? Or what do you say to them? Do you watch a movie with them and say, okay, kids, here's the deal. This movie could be so much better if it wasn't made by this, if these lines were put in it instead of these, but watch it and form your own opinion.
I do a little bit of film critic guy when I watch movies. Sometimes I want to kind of give them kind of a nibble on something. We were watching something recently. We were watching a horror movie, and I told my son, I said, watch how the camera moves in the scene and watch how the music kind of cues up and the sound effects. But more importantly, I want my oldest son is starting to watch R-rated movies, and I kind of curate them. There's R-rated and then there's R-rated. So the first one I can do, and often I've seen them so many times I can actually say, all right, we're fast forwarding this part, or I'm gonna cover your eyes on that part. So and that's a tricky slope. But yeah, I mean, I want them to see comedies, and I want them to kind of experience things. And selfishly, as a parent, it's like I'm living it again through their eyes. I'm experiencing movies again. So that's just a treat for me. But yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question as far as the content and PG-13 or R and what they're ready to handle and what they're not ready to handle. And I talk a lot, especially my oldest son, about race and racism and things you can't say. And I just tell them there are many topics now in the culture you don't go near. You don't mention them. You don't tiptoe around them. You don't allude to them. You stay so far away that they're miles away, because I don't want him to get in trouble, because if he's a kid, he doesn't know better. He doesn't understand the nuance of the culture. And I just want to protect him.
So when will you let your kids watch Blazing Saddles?
That's a good question. I think Blazing Saddles and 20-Year-Old Virgin are sort of two of my go-tos, and we're not there yet, but maybe in 2 years we'll see. It's a case by case. I will say I had a horrible parent moment a couple of years ago before they were remotely ready for it. We did watch Borat together, and I was like the greatest dad because they loved it. They howled, but it was wildly inappropriate and not my finest hour. And my wife gave me a stink eye for about 2 weeks, and I deserved it.
I was gonna say, how did Mrs. Totto appreciate your latitude in letting the kids watch?
It's funny, when I was a kid, my parents, I don't know what they were thinking. I was 10. They took me to see Midnight Express, which is a Turkish prison movie with rape and sex and violence and gore and you name it. And I'm going to visit my mom this weekend. She's turning 80. I will probably bring it up because I like to shame her. But when I was 20 and thinking of that movie, what were you thinking?
But look at you. You came out fine.
Mostly fine.
Mostly fine. Well, that movie, now, you mentioned this here. What is... You talk about they're talking about canceling classic movies. Mm-hmm. The woke establishment canceling classic movies. What are some top examples of this? And what are they actually doing about it? Would Animal House be in this lump of movies? Or I would imagine Blazing Saddles for sure.
Some of this is potential not happening. Some of it has happened. HBO Max pulled Gone with the Wind briefly from its streaming service a year or two ago. I think it was after one op-ed in the LA Times that said it didn't fully capture the horrors of slavery, and it didn't. I mean, that's pretty accurate. Right. But other films have come under the watchful eye of the mob. Even Disney Plus has put warning labels on some of their own content. Like I think it's Peter Pan, the animated film, and maybe Dumbo as well. Alleged racial stereotypes you can sort of see and judge for yourself. But there's been other conversations. I think it was AMC had a special series of shows maybe last year, and I forget the name of it, but they were re-examining older movies through a modern lens. And I think some of those conversations actually have been helpful. Breakfast at Tiffany's is a great example of Andy Rooney playing an Asian character with bad makeup and very stereotypical accents and dialogue. And I mean, I'm glad that that's not going to happen today, that no straight white male actor is going to pull that off. It's, I think we can all agree that's not exactly his finest hour as a performer, but it's an awkward conversation because, I think there's a lot of not trusting the audience, that we can't process things for ourselves, and that we'll look at a John Hughes movie and say, oh, that's problematic, but it was in the 80s and that was acceptable at the time. And we can have those conversations, but I don't want warning labels, and I don't want it pulled from any sort of streaming service or what have you. And, I think there was a lot of intensity toward that end after the George Floyd death and all the riots and protests. I think things have calmed down a bit, but you don't know culturally how things will spike up again. And I do fear for that.
Well, and I think too, when did it go away where you can't just look at a movie as art and just say, this was just a production that was put together back in 1972. And this is at the time what was culturally acceptable. And people laughed at it. I mean, I remember sitting down with my parents and watching, or actually my grandparents. My parents never let me stay up late and watch Johnny Carson. But I'd sit there and watch Johnny Carson, and you would have, you go back and you look at some of the old Carson episodes and some of the things that some of the comedians would get away with and some of the things that Johnny would say. And I just laughed at it. My grandparents laughed at it. Nobody thought it was offensive. So it just seems like, again, certain things were acceptable at the time and are not acceptable now. Why can't we educate instead of just pull stuff back and say, you just can't see this?
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem is social media. It really kind of exacerbates all of this. If
Yeah.
People get a feeling of accomplishment, and it's an odd sort of, I think there's even a kind of a chemical reaction in the body that when you get like almost like a high from being high and mighty on social media. But if you see something that you think is unpleasant and you share it and you get a lot of likes and retweets and things like that, sometimes it builds up momentum. But I also think that one thing I don't think we talk about enough is that the media is all on board with cancel culture and supporting this. And when a Morgan Wallen gets in trouble, when Dave Chappelle uh, upsets people, they love to write about it, and you can tell in the tenor of their conversations that they're not in favor of this free speech. They're not in favor of sort of getting into difficult conversations. They don't mind things being canceled and people being canceled. It's been shocking for me to see, but it's very obvious. And even some of the late night shows, watching Stephen Colbert, who I don't agree with politically, but he's a pretty funny guy, seeing him kind of yuck it up about Dr. Seuss books going away. I mean, and you could say, okay, those images are offensive. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But we can have that conversation. But I don't want to lose the ability to go buy that book. I'm not a monster. I may not agree with that it's racist or something, but I just it's unpleasant to think about where this conversation goes and where the culture is going.
Who doesn't like green eggs and ham?
I try to talk it. With all the salt and pepper in the world, it doesn't work.
Who are the people at the top of this mountain of woke garbage? You mentioned Judd Apatow in your book, which cracked me up. But I know Judd Apatow seems to be on board with the whole woke mob. Deborah Messing is up there as well. She seems to thoroughly enjoy just grinding it out against anybody who has an opinion opposite of hers. Who else is at the top of this mountain that we need to knock off?
There are a lot of comedians, sadly, who are fit in this category. Mark Maron, sadly, I mentioned Stephen Colbert. And I do have to wonder if this is an authentic position they have, or maybe there's out of fear. Apatow is a really interesting case because I love a lot of his early films. I think he's a very talented guy. Yeah. And yet, if you watch them now, there's a lot of bro humor, and you could think it's like the patriarchy. It's white. What's the term? White privilege in play. Like, he would not make those movies today. And partially because he probably couldn't make those movies today. So I think sometimes if a comedian has a darker past, or even just a typical past that was, acceptable back in the day, I wonder if an Apatow is doing some self-preservation here. I don't know. I have to talk to him. He blocked me on Twitter, so apparently we don't get along. I would love to have a conversation with him, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But I think part of it is understanding that if someone dug into their past, there's some interesting material that could cause them some grief. Mark Maron has admitted that, and even Howard Stern, who I used to listen to religiously for years, has taken a very odd turn in his career and his persona. I think he's scared to death that if you uncover his past material, he's done. But so far that hasn't happened yet.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the double standard at play with this woke sentiment. I mean, if they truly wanted to erase people who have done problematic material, Howard Stern should be gone tomorrow. I don't want that. I'm just saying, by their own rules.
No, exactly. Now, is this woke business? Is this wokeness, I should say, hitting show business's bottom line, negatively or positively?
It's the one question I stumble over. I think we can point to the virtue bombs that we talked about before and say, yes, here's an example, here's another example. But I don't think it's hurting the industry to a point where they feel it aggressively yet, because they're not changing. It's full steam ahead. So I think in order for them to really reconsider what's going on and to understand that maybe they're alienating a large part of their audience, they have to suffer some consequences. I mean, fiscally, obviously. So Stephen Colbert can't draw Johnny Carson numbers. No one can, because the landscape of entertainment is so different now. You can exist and thrive with a much smaller crowd. So, the fact that he pushes away half the country aggressively, it doesn't matter to him right now because he's able to survive with the numbers he gets. So it could be that a lot of these projects either get enough funding, get enough revenue stream coming in, or if I'm Sony and I think my 3 other movie projects bombed because they were woke, but then along comes Spider-Man and I'm flush with cash. So I don't know. I'm not behind the scenes, crunching the numbers. So that's why I
Right.
can't fully answer this. But it is interesting, and I think there may be a tipping point at some point, but we're not there yet.
Well, I'd be curious because when you see shows like Gutfeld on Fox that are
Mhm.
drawing super strong numbers, that you would think that somebody in a money position somewhere in Hollywood or
Yes.
New York would say, you know what? Listen, this guy is pulling some serious, serious viewership.
Mhm.
Maybe we should back off on this. But is it gotten to the point now where maybe some of these people have gone too far and they can't pull back?
I don't think they want to pull back. I think it didn't take Gutfeld, and no offense to him because he's a very funny guy, and I
Right.
kudos to the show and what he's done. You didn't need to see that to predict, well, if every late night show is either left of center, neutral, or aggressively left, and you got half the country which is right of center, that maybe if you put a show up there with a pretty talented guy or gal, it could draw a crowd. I mean, look at what Gutfeld's doing because there's no A-list stars. He doesn't have Tom Hanks on his couch. Doesn't have Denzel
Right.
Washington or Julia Roberts. No one like that. And it
Right.
doesn't seem to have a big budget. It's very conversation driven. They have some
Yeah.
sketches, but it's not a big to do. You look at the Late Show; it's lavishly produced, and you can tell there's a lot of cash going on there. Gutfeld doesn't have
Yes.
that, and yet he's at or near the top because he's addressing half the country, which has been starved for entertainment. So you and I are not movie producers or TV producers or studio moguls. We knew that. Why don't they know that? Well, they do know that. They just don't want it. It's so obvious.
Right.
And there's actually HBO and or HBO Max has a new show coming soon. I think his name is Bomani Jones. I think he's a sports commentator, which he'll get into
Yes.
politics as
Hmm.
well. That's coming soon. He's a liberal guy. And there's nothing wrong with that. He may be a really smart. I don't know him. He might be smart. That's
Hmm.
fine. Maybe his show will be good. I'm not prejudging it, but you look at the landscape and you go, let's get another left of center guy and throw him out there. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it just seems so incredibly oversaturated. I want to go ahead.
Yeah.
This is a funny. It's a funny line in your book. Actually, page 49 of Virtue Bombs, which everybody should be buying this now. I mean, not like
Now.
right now, but when the interview's done.
Oh, no,
Hey,
now.
go ahead. Actually, you know what? If you can watch this on your computer and then pull it up on your phone. This is this is what cracked me up. You're talking about celebrities always looking for press, presumably the good kind. Alec Baldwin doesn't do a happy dance whenever his pugilistic tendencies draw a throng of reporters. Still, they want the attention. I mean, I'm sure he's not really happy with the attention that he's getting now since he killed somebody, but
Yes.
I digress. Uh, take Charlize Theron. She hijacked a few news cycles early in 2021 by saying she wanted to headline a Die Hard style franchise. Then she went ahead and doubled down and says she wants to be a lesbian John McClane.
Mhm.
I,
I just
I was laughing out loud. That's why I grabbed a piece of paper and I shoved it in this. I go, I have got to talk to you about this. This just made me laugh because I love Charlize Theron, brilliant actress. But the whole
Yeah.
concept of them trying to wokeify these franchises. I mean,
Mhm.
why not just make a movie like you said that's going to be funny or action packed? And if you have your little woke agenda woven in there, fine. But don't hijack a franchise like Die Hard or like you were saying, Terminator or
Yeah.
any other TV show. Just create your own.
But also, what would be so magical about that if she was an action hero and she happened to be lesbian? That's fine. I have no problem with that. But when she
Right.
says that in an interview, that's the cue. That's basically saying, I want this to get more attention. And the press loves that. They love that angle. Instead of saying, well, how would that make it better or different? Because it really wouldn't. I mean, it could be a
Right.
great movie, it could be a bad movie. It doesn't really make it any different. It's a virtue signal. She's saying that I want this to be that. It's like Andrew Garfield or other Spidey actors saying, Spider-Man should be gay or Spider-Man should be black or Spider-Man should be a person of color. Well, then you quit and then you demand that it happen. But they often don't. They just sign the checks. I think my favorite example is Amy Schumer. She was in a movie a couple of years ago. I think it was I Feel Pretty. And she was going through the press jamboree and she was being attacked and critiqued. It's kind of sad. And she was basically saying, I wanted a person of color. I wanted someone with a different body type in the role. I'm like, you're the producer of this movie and the star. You can hold up your hand and say, hey guys and gals, we're going in a different direction. But you didn't. You're the star. You cashed the checks. You made the movie. It's absurd. And it's fun to poke fun at it, but there really are ramifications of all of the stuff that I talk about in the book, because it impacts the culture.
No, it really does. I mean, I love the chapter that you have in here, chapter 16, which is going to be my personal favorite, Comedians Fight Back. And you, well, this is funny. Right before you lead into this chapter, this is, you talk about the ridiculous nature of mainstream media, where literally USA Today fact-checked not one, but two stories that were on Babylon Bee, which, by the way, anybody who has a sense of humor needs to follow Babylon Bee. They are hilarious. But they actually, and it's like a right-wing version of The Onion. Would that be a pretty fair assessment?
Yeah, except The Onion hasn't been funny in 12 years. I used to love The Onion, but when a Democrat is in the White House, The Onion it basically stands down. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, and in that case, the Babylon Bee says, "Here we go." But these headlines that were actually fact-checked by USA Today. Headlines on the Babylon Bee: with moon water announcement, Trump proposes space navy. I was and the other one was Ninth Circuit Court overturns death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. USA Today actually fact-checked this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost a separate subject, but the Facebook had been going to war with the Babylon Bee. They demonetized their posts. They block them at times, and it sounds comical, but it's not. And I don't even know if this is woke or more political, but these big tech operations, they don't want right of center jokes or even just jokes that kind of poke the narrative. Ryan Long is a very funny comedian. He's pretty aggressively apolitical, and he's been bitten by big tech time and again. And again, he's not wearing a red MAGA hat. He's just trying to be funny. And some jokes are not allowed to be funny these days. And again, his stuff isn't even offensive. It's just kind of poking the bear, and they don't like when the bear is poked.
Yeah. No, if it's their bear, if it's the other bear, you can step on him. You can set the other bear on fire. They could care less. But if it's their bear, no, please don't bring a differing opinion that's going to cause people to think. This you talk about the woke revolution. You mentioned the 2019 movie No Safe Spaces, which addressed the former free speech assault by campus progressives with little resistance from the adults in charge. The movie proved frighteningly, forgive me, prescient. Is that correct? Prescient. Prescient. Okay. See, that's why I shouldn't have followed Belushi as a role model. If I had stuck around one more year in English, I would have learned that word. With woke insanity swiftly moving from universities to the real world. And that, I've said that forever, and so have a lot of comedians. I don't know how comedians do shows on college campuses. I don't.
Yeah, it's rough. I mean, famously, Jerry Seinfeld said, I think I mentioned in the book, I don't do college campuses anymore, and it caused a kerfuffle. I'll throw another $3 word at you, because Jerry Seinfeld is squeaky clean, right? He's funny. He's not edgy. He's not political. I mean, he's great. I'm not diminishing him, but his whole brand is for the whole family. And when he says, "I'm out, I don't do colleges," that got a lot of attention, and that's why.
No, definitely. And this chapter is great because you talk about the 2015 documentary, Can We Take a Joke? Which gave us a frightening peek at the problem. You look at, like you mentioned, Gilbert Gottfried, Adam Carolla, Jim Norton, all these guys that have, that are so opinionated and don't fit the mold of what should be out there. And you mentioned the forming of Compound Media with Anthony Cumia from the Opie and Anthony show. I've been lucky to be on the Anthony Cumia show on several occasions with a comedian, good friend of mine, Dave Landau. But you mentioned on here, you talk about one of the hosts on here, Aaron Berg, and it says the biggest, let's see, forgive me, I lost my space here. Woke comedians, for the most part, are quote unquote people who haven't been able to excel at the art form. It's an excuse for not being able to kill in the clubs, according to comedian Aaron Berg, who's very, very funny. The biggest killers, the funniest guys and girls, paid their dues. They were able to learn how to kill. These people don't want to put that work in, and they don't want to associate with those who want to put that work in. And he says, he cites Gary Goldman as an exception. Goldman shifted his material in recent years to reflect a more woke persona, but he retained the laughter. And I thought that paragraph alone was brilliant because, yeah, you see a lot of these quote unquote woke comedians that are out there that are largely based in Los Angeles and New York, because I'll tell you what, I can't think of any club that I would work at in between those two parts of the world that would accept someone going up there with their woke agenda and just bombing, and people in the crowd going, "Oh, that was so brilliant, so well crafted."
Well, and that's what I think it's a newish term, clapter, and they often refer to like late night TV. It's not, you're not really laughing, you're clapping because you approve of the message, and that could be left or right. That seems just kind of lazy, and I find that even with Bill Maher, who I think has been really kind of throwing a lot of sharp elbows of late, comedically speaking, satirically speaking. I listen to some of his monologues, and there's some clapter there too. And listen, not every joke lands, and not every joke is a home run. But it is a little weird that that's become sort of the de facto reaction. Like, it's okay, I agree with what Bill Maher says, and I clap. But I don't know, you're a comedian, going for the laughs.
Well, what's so funny is when you watch the late night comedy sets and somebody tells a joke and it gets no laughter, and then all of a sudden you see people clap, and it's because the applause light went on.
That's right. And Carson back in the day would turn that into something legitimately funny. He'd make a bad joke into a funny moment. That's why he was a genius.
No, he was brilliant. You mentioned in here that the wokeness can get better, but it may get worse. How can it get worse? And then more importantly, how can it get better as we wrap up our conversation here today? And again, the book Virtue Bombs, Christian Totto, who is with me here today. Grab your copy on Amazon. It is an absolutely, everything that I flipped through here, so well crafted, so well researched. Please pick up a copy of this. I don't care. If you're left, you're left. If you're right, you're right. Doesn't matter. You need to know that you need to see the playbook behind what's going on in Hollywood. But seriously, how you say it can get better, but it may get worse. And you even go on here and say much, much worse.
Well, I mean, what if Netflix decides to stop working with Dave Chappelle? What if Spotify says, Joe Rogan, hit the bricks, you're done? That's right. What's worse, because it's not just them. It sends a message to every other podcaster and every other comedian that if the top guy or gal in the industry can be canceled, can be punished, what's going to happen to me? One of the things that's really scary is sort of in these cultural moments is that often you're canceled or you're censored or you're taken down from social media, and they don't always say why. With Chappelle and Rogan, they have. But I talked to a lot of people that say, yeah, I got banned or I got blocked, and they didn't say why. And that's not an accident. That means they want to put in your head, okay, I can't even go near these subjects. And then if I can't go near these subjects, I pull back and I self-censor. And that's really awful because you don't know what's the line and you can't even go near the line. So you stay far, far away from the line just for self-preservation. So that's what scares me. And that's what I think could get worse here. The George Floyd situation made all of cancel culture worse. We didn't expect that. And actually, I think a few months before that, Dave Chappelle and Bill Burr put out some very good comedy specials that kind of blasted this whole woke sentiment. I thought, there's the moment we're finally getting away from this. Here's real progress. And then we went, 20 steps back. So I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what happens tomorrow. And I think you could also argue that if President Trump rises up and is the nominee in 2024, that there may be even more censorial efforts going on across the culture, and that that would not be his fault, but it could be a renewed effort to kind of silence people. I mean, they kicked him off of social media, and there are people on there who do and say much, much worse. So that was a chilling moment. I thought it was chilling, and I think it's chilling for the culture. If you love or hate Trump, he shouldn't be blocked from social media. I mean, there are horrible, horrible human beings on there allowed to tweet, and now he can't.
No, it's crazy. How can it? I've got to see a light at the end of the tunnel, Christian. How does this get better? How do people fight back? I mean, is there anybody in Hollywood that is pushing back? Is it going to take somebody who finally gets a position, say at Paramount, Universal, Lionsgate, MGM, where somebody comes into that position and they don't have that monster woke sensibility, and they're like, you know what? I'm just going to make good movies. I want funny comedies. I want people to be dialed in and talk about these comedies like Animal House and Caddyshack 20, 30 years, 40 years down the road. And you just don't see those being produced today. I mean, is it going to take somebody to get into that kind of a position at one of these outlets before the rest of the industry follows suit?
I think there's two ways to go forward in a positive way. One is what you just mentioned, like if an Elon Musk all of a sudden buys, a massive platform, a Netflix, a broadcast, whatever, just throws.
He could just buy California. You know that he could just buy California.
Yeah, that the quick. I think if that happens, it definitely opens the door for people to emerge and to say, I'm going to do what I want to do and say what I want to say and let the chips fall where they may. But I think what the more realistic situation, although I'm rooting for that, is that more people stand up, more people are brave. And the more people who are brave and survive and thrive, the more others will be emboldened. And I've talked to a few people in recent months who did that. Gina Carano, Tyler Fisher. I just spoke to a musician who kind of went through something similar where he started to do protest songs that were not with the groupthink. And there were cancellation style events happening to him, but it rebounded. And then actually he got more famous. He got more gigs. And I think what I'm hearing often is that if you stick your neck out and if you stay true to your voice, that often there are benefits to it. Gina Carano is now producing and starring in movies for the Daily Wire. A year ago, she was canceled and her career looked in jeopardy. Tyler Fisher has suffered as well in various ways, but he's rising up now. The Tim Dillons of the world, are like Howard Stern 2.0, or maybe I can say 1.0. So I think if enough, comedians and enough artists stand up and say, no, I'm doing what I want to do. I'm creating a following like I want to create. And if you don't like me, just turn away. And if the more people do that and the more people are emboldened by that, I think that's what breaks the back of the situation.
Well, I think what makes it difficult is if you have a comedian or actor who is obviously represented by a monster agency like a William Morris or Gersh or APA or anybody like that, it's difficult for them to go ahead and have an opinion because you know what? They like their big house. They like their nice car. They like going out to fancy restaurants and buying cool things. And now all of a sudden their agent says, hey, you know what? Listen, I appreciate your stance on this and that you really seem to like Ron DeSantis down in Florida, but you will not mention that ever again or else we're not going to work together.
Yeah, those are powerful forces and it's hard to deny that. And also I feel more worse for the rising comedian or the rising actor or rising screenwriter who doesn't have the clout and cash and cachet to kind of fight back against that because they're hanging on by their threads. These are artists who are doing it for their, a lot of people do it for their passion and their love and not for the money. And the money often doesn't come. I mean, there are people who are just going to scrape by and, if they're scraping by now and they fear cancellation, they fear, agents not calling them back, clubs saying you can't work here. That's brutal. That's not easy. And, and the good thing, though, is that there are so many different ways around it. You can have a podcast. You can have a Patreon account. You can, have your own channel, your own website, your own, YouTube following. You can go in locals. There are places to kind of build your own tribe and people are doing it. But we need more of that.
No, I agree completely. And I think everyone, again, needs to grab a copy of your book, Virtue Bombs, How Hollywood Got Woke and Lost Its Soul. Go on Amazon, snag your copy today. Christian Totto, who is in Denver, Colorado, which you're in a pretty liberal enclave over there.
Yes, I am.
You surviving okay? You just hide out in the mountain with the nuclear missiles that we have hidden. Is that where you're at right now? So I don't see any windows behind you.
My fellow Denver citizens are very kind and nice people, but they're certainly left of center. And I have people in my inner circle. My wife is left of center. So, I survive and it actually in a way kind of grounds me because I don't want to be vicious and cruel and be,
right.
And feel the wrath of people like some are doing to people like me. So I want a better thing. I want a landscape where we can all be, let each other speak and have our own creative voices and if your woke creative voice draws a huge crowd, then God bless you, You're doing.
No, I agree. Well, I think it's great that you're right of center and your wife is left of center. My mom was Democrat. My dad was Republican, and they just never talked politics. My dad, that was the rule at the house. No politics, no religion. That's it. And as soon as anybody started on anything, As soon as
The
anybody started in on that,
the
yeah,
2016
done.
election was hard for us. I'll just say that.
Ooh, I'm sure, I'm sure of that. That's when you decided to let the kids watch Borat. Is that what happened?
It was not that sequence of events, but that would have been a palate cleanser, that's for sure.
Well, Christian, I can't thank you enough for your time. People go on his website, hollywoodandtotto.com, grab a copy of his book, Virtue Bombs. Thank you so much for your time, sir. I appreciate it. And again, keep up the good fight. I love I'm looking forward to this on the road here. Virtue Bombs, grab your copy as soon as you can. Christian, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you for fighting the good fight.
Appreciate it. Christian Totto, author of the book Virtue Bombs, here with us today. His website, hollywoodintotto.com. Huge thanks to Christian and to you for tuning in. As always, all of our episodes are available on YouTube. You can go on all your podcast platforms, iTunes, and all the other happy stuff where you can download your audio versions of this. But again, make sure you check out our sponsor, VegasSportsAdvantage.com. Huge thanks to those guys. At Vegas Bets For You is their social media handle, Vegas Sports Advantage. If you're going to bet sports, go into it with some brain power. Let these guys do the numbers for you. Save some money. Type in the promo code Derek35 and save 35% on any of their betting packages. Grab a copy of my album, Double Down, while you're on Amazon. Look at that. You get a twofer. People who bought Virtue Bombs also bought Double Down from Derek Richards. Available on iTunes, Spotify, and Amazon. And the Irish Comedy Tour cranking up here very, very soon. Our website, theirishcomedytour.com. See the special first on Amazon Prime. If you have Prime, it is absolutely free. Who doesn't have Prime? All the other platforms at the bottom there where you can see the special. And these are the dates. Old Saybrook, Connecticut, New York, down to Florida, Massachusetts. And then, I love this, March 21st, Denver, Colorado. We're doing a show in Christian Totto's living room. TheIrishComedyTour.com is our website. Huge thanks to, again, my guest, Christian Totto, and to you for tuning in. My name's Derek Richards. We'll see you next time here on A Drink with Derek. Bye.
You're watching Conservative Television of America, working hard to stick socialism where the sun don't shine.